Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service, and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301.
Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson, and today I've kicked Kyle Crawford to the curb, and I have a special guest. I'd like to welcome Tony Schroder to the Strong Dads podcast. Tony, how are you doing today?
Great, Merle. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so just a little bit of disclosure here. Tony and I have been friends for some time now, and we are involved in several different projects and different things together. And I think, it's important to know that a lot of the reason why I've invited Tony to be on our show today is because we have some interest and some passions that align. Yeah. And so I've mentioned many times before on the show that my wife Linda and I, we operate a ministry called Rock Solid Families. And Tony, you've been part of helping that get off the ground and the work that we do for marriages and families there. But in particular, there's a part of Rock Solid Families that we call Strong Dads, which is this podcast, and there's just some other parts of that where there's always been not always, but I would say in the last 15 years, this thing that has hit me that we have a dad problem here. Yeah. We have, and that was from my years of working at the elementary school as a counselor. That, many of the situations, the kids that were walking in my office, I could just go, wow, well, what's the dad situation look like there? And it was never very promising, okay? Right. And so I connected that dot a long time ago, and now I'm doing some of the work that I'm doing, but you're doing it also in a slightly different way. And so we're going to get into that a little bit today. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work that you're doing, and then like maybe the question, why? Why do we do these things? All right. So let me thank our sponsors, and then we'll get into some of our conversation. Strong Dads wants to welcome Quality Auto Mart for being a sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. So for all of your automotive needs, whether it's fixing up a car or even looking for a golf cart, you can go to Mark and Nancy Repke at Quality Auto Mart, located outside of Batesville, Indiana. Also, we would like to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for being a sponsor of the Strong Dad podcast. So as we are recording this, it is coming into the fall season, and mum's the word. And so Casey has a boatload of mums down there. So for any of your landscaping, hardscaping, or even gift needs, go to Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and he will take care of you. All right. So Tony, let's talk for a second. Give me a little bit of your background. Like, let's let these guys know who you are.
Well, I'm pretty native to this area, actually from northern Kentucky, but born and raised, and I spent most of my life in a business, in a meat processing business. So I did a lot of traveling all around the country. So as I got older, I struggled to have roots in the city because everything I did was outside the city in other places. But I do have a family. My wife, Kelly, we've been married about 22 years, and I have 4 children, Allie, Megan, Anthony, and Colin at home, and lots of other kids that come and go that we allow to live with us as they're going through life and trying to figure life out. But the majority of what I like to think that I'm focused on is really living out my calling to Jesus, to be the full man that he has created me to be. Mm-hmm. And I'm pursuing that, I think, this final chapter of my life.
Yeah, so you talk about some of the other visitors that come in and park at your house. So your youngest son, Colin, is how old?
He's 18.
He's 18. So you guys could potentially be, empty nesters, so to speak, pretty soon. But you invite other, mostly I would say younger men into the house. And they're men that you see are in a hard way, in a difficult place in life. Okay.
Yes.
And so I want to just maybe for a second talk about like, why? Why do you do that? I mean, you just retired from a lifelong work. You could have freedom to go travel and do all kinds of things. Why do you contaminate and pollute your house with all of this work now?
Right. Well, I think that the big answer is I have an eternal perspective.
Okay.
And having an eternal perspective, my goal isn't to achieve worldly things in this life, but it's to do what I'm called to do. The real prize to me is being in heaven with our God someday. And so all of us have things that he's gifted us to do, and he's shown me this area of my life that I think he's equipped me to do, and I'm doing the best I can walking through it.
Okay. Yeah. I can definitely connect with a lot of that. Let's talk a little bit about what we can call I'll copycat and plagiarize the book, The Boy Crisis. Let's talk about the boy crisis, which, by the way, any of you that want to know more about what we're talking about, Dr. Warren Farrell wrote the book, The Boy Crisis. I've referenced it a couple times in different shows. It is an incredible piece of work of bringing together and shining a light on actually what this crisis is and why we're using the word crisis. Because where the boy goes the father, in terms of if he's a boy who's having problems, he's probably going to be a father who has problems, and then that father will create another boy that has the same situation or problems, and so the cycle goes. And it really runs into so many different areas. Like we know that that boys that have a not very good father or an absent father have a highly or increased likelihood for drug use, for crime, for out of wedlock babies, all right, for dropping out of school. So all of these different things, and we always want to point the finger at so many other things. Well, the schools need to be better. Well, the churches need to be better. And I think you and I would agree that, we can all improve there. But until we deal with this father-boy situation, we are not going after anything more than the symptoms.
Yes.
All right. And I mean, that's what the Boy Crisis book talks about. That's what I see actually in my work. I can't tell you how many times, like when I'm working with a guy in my office doing man coaching, and I have a guy who's struggling, I will almost always say, tell me your dad's story. Tell me your dad's story. And it is mind-blowing how often I hear the negative of the dad's story. He wasn't present. He was a jerk. He was an alcoholic. Every once in a while, I'll have my dad was great. I mean, I'm talking like 1 in 10, maybe. Okay. So the elephant is in the room. And I think part of what we're doing is trying to address that. All right. And so, Tony, tell me a little bit about you. I don't know how many guys you've pulled into your house, okay? But what do you pour into them? Like, what do you see yourself actually giving to them?
Right. Well, I didn't have this all figured out in the very beginning, but what I noticed is my boys would bring other young men, and they liked what they saw. They saw a mom and dad who loved each other. They saw laughter in the kitchen. They saw meals together. They saw prayer before meals. And so some type of a semblance of family, this desire of some kind of security and joy. That's what I started to pay attention to. And then I started realizing, because in some ways, some of these boys, based on them knowing my story, probably from my sons, think I'm worldly successful. That there's something there that every young boy might want to achieve. And so what the credibility that God has given me is these boys have some interest in my life. And while they may think it looks a certain path that the world might tell them, the reality is my path wasn't always a happy path. And so in a nutshell, these boys are looking for direction. I hear that most often. I just want some direction. And their fathers aren't there to give them their direction. Their fathers are worried about the next girlfriend. Their fathers are having children that are becoming their priority outside of that initial family. Or their fathers have addictions that make them unavailable. And many of their fathers may have passed away or abandoned them. So over and over again, I see hurt and pain in young men that may show that in different ways: anger, getting in trouble, or just quietness. But it's real. And I think that's what got me involved, that they actually wanted to know what I had to say.
Yeah, the idea there that they were seeking a little, sense of peace, a little bit of peace in their life. You mentioned, and I think I took this for granted, the value of being around the house, laughing and joking in the kitchen, having dinner together. I was fortunate. I grew up with that.
Yeah.
I grew up with that, as well as I believe most of the kids in my neighborhood did. Like that, we'd always talk about, well, dinner tonight, and that was a common thing when I was growing up. And mom and dads were together. And back in that day, never really thought about it. Like, you just did it. It was dinner time. And now we know that through research, the most valuable time that a family can have together, the most valuable time a family can have together is dinner time. All right. That's where counseling takes place. That's where relationship is built. That's where conflicts are resolved. Right. That's where laughter is had. And when you remove that, you take away the regular diet of processing the world.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is just crazy. I think that's so, I know several of the boys that you work with, and you really wouldn't pick them out of the crowd. It's not like they look different or they're all tatted up and they look criminal or something like that. Like, these just look like regular guys. Okay. So tell me, I don't know, like how long do you feel like you are guys wanting to be in your presence in your house? Do they come in and it's just like you've invited them in and they can leave when they want? Or do you have, is it any kind of organization in your mind, like, hey, if you're going to stay here, you need to stay here for this amount of time? I mean, it's not like any kind of set program, is it?
Yeah, we never thought of it that way. We have considered what the circumstances are, and we've been comfortable with the way it works. And typically, sometimes young men would spend the night, a lot of times on the weekends. Sometimes they just come over and visit. We had one young man that I challenged. He wanted to live in a cabin in the woods, which we had, and he lived in the cabin in the woods for about a year. And he got that out of his system. And so
the cabin didn't have any running water or anything, did it?
No, he hooked up some solar power. I helped him pay for that, so he had enough to put a refrigerator, but no running water. It was on a pond. And he had this dream, and I'm a guy. Hey, chase that dream. Here, let me help you.
Yeah.
And so I think he checked that box. But we're pretty open. God's been good to us and protected us. That we're just available. We try to be available.
That's a key word, right? Available. So what are some of the outcomes that you have actually seen from these guys? Okay, so you open your house up, all right? Can you actually say, hey, I think we've seen some good here? or is it just a very unknown and basically you were a pillow to sleep on kind of place?
Yeah. Well, my personality is one, and I don't know if everybody could identify this, but my profession, my main profession, was to be a salesperson. Now, a lot of people think maybe not good things about salespeople, but if you're a professional salesperson, you realize it's a process. And so you don't feel rejection from the process because the sale isn't, it may happen at any time. And that's just my mindset, that I don't give up on anyone, that no one's too far gone, that's just not my mindset. My mindset is to build a relationship because I authentically care about someone, and at the right time, the door will open where they'll be able to hear what I'm saying. And so that's what I, pay attention to. That's how I think about each person as they come into my life.
Man, that is so mature and it's so thought out, because I've always said that I'm a terrible salesperson because I want it now, right? I mean, I'm excited. You should be excited. Let's go ahead and close the deal kind of thing. And if it doesn't happen, I get very frustrated.
Right.
And I know through training and education, they're like, no, this is about the relationship. And you never know when somebody, that it might be 5 years from now where they call you up and say, hey, I remember we talked, do you still sell this stuff? And the next thing you know, you've got a sale, right?
Right.
So, man, walking through Christian faith is so much that same way.
Yeah.
It's that same way. People have to buy when they're ready to buy.
Yeah. And it's important that I don't want any person to think they're a product, because that's not
Right.
what I'm saying. It's the
Right.
attitude that I'm not going to write someone off. And I think that, when you talk about like what are some of the outcomes that I've had, it's all across the board. I've had kids respond wonderfully. I've baptized kids who wanted to become Christian young men. I've seen them grow beyond what I ever thought I could do. I had one couple tell me, rewrote that young man off, and you just baptized him.
Wow.
Now, lots of people go and do that. This isn't about Tony Schroder, because lots of people poured into that young man's life, but we all have to be available. We don't know at what point we walk into somebody's life. But I have some people that I think were too far gone. They were being poisoned by their mother, by the kind of music they were encouraged to listen to, just the words, the vulgarity, the lifestyle. Many of these kids get poisoned by boyfriends and girlfriends that come outside into the family and disrupt the family and then move. And these are things, while I understand divorce, that's part of my painful past that I try to talk to these young people about. I understand it, but as parents, we have to be very thoughtful about allowing people into our family that aren't necessarily permanent. But I see all these disruptions. So I have this plethora of kids that do fantastic and kids that fall by the wayside. My belief is, my desire is, if I can help them sometime in the future, they'll go, yeah, I can trust this guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to call him up.
That's an interesting point that you bring up about how we can intentionally or unintentionally invite other people or things into our home, into our life that have a great influence, but it doesn't always necessarily mean to the positive. It could be, the impact could be negative or positive. And I think, we don't realize how, especially a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old boy, how he is at a crossroads. He's no longer a boy. He wants to be a man, and now he's searching for validation. He's searching for purpose. He's searching for fun and excitement. And anything that flips his switch, right, is going to be something that he goes toward. And so this is, we've all done that. Like we all, not all, but I would say most of us guys have had our days where we went off the rails a bit. Maybe it was a little bit of partying. Maybe it was out with people we shouldn't be, those kind of things. But these guys, when they have no structure in the home that you're talking about, the availability of solidness and just that predictability, they'll gravitate towards whatever they can, right? And oftentimes it's these dangerous things. It speaks to the idea, without what you're doing, guys are going to find something to quench them, all right? Whether it's a gang, whether it's a drug. And so all of these things, the guy won't stay in limbo. He will find something that in his mind thinks is going to quench his thirst. But the well runs dry quickly, right? And so I just love the idea that the word that you're using there about availability. I just have to be available to be able to give them the better things, the fruit of what you have. Very good stuff there. So what's your hope for these guys?
Well, the truth is, God has provided me an amazing life. Everything doesn't go fantastic for me, but I have a joy and a peace inside that I do really want everybody to experience. And that may seem odd to an outsider. Life isn't easy, but I'm excited about my life. And so I think the final outcome, because I told you I have an eternal perspective, is that someday I'm with each of these men in heaven someday, and that they bring their wives and their children along with them. That's my hope and desire for them, because in a nutshell, that's all that really matters. Because life may be very difficult for some of these fellas and families. So that's my dream. I dream that for them. But it's not just that, hey, right now they're making decisions about their life that are going to lead to the messed up adult. I did that. I tried to become an alcoholic. I mean, I literally, if I didn't get sick so easily, I probably would have been an alcoholic. Before I was 30, I was divorced 2 times. I was miserable. I was unhappy. And yet a lot of things look good. I made good money. I had a lot of things going on in my life. So these young men are going, well, I want money. I want these things that look like success. Well, they don't necessarily bring joy and happiness, and there's still messes in their life. And at the end of the day, God showed me through his word how to be a father and how to be a husband and how to be a man. And I think that's a lot of what your work is that you're talking about. And there comes a lot of satisfaction and joy from that. And I want to pass it on.
Yeah. What's your greatest fear? Concerning this situation, these boys and what you're doing right now.
I can't tell you I have any great fear. At the end of the day, we all have free will. I can't force anybody to go down a certain path. But all I can do is expose them to another lifestyle, because they're getting exposed to all kinds of lifestyles. And it's important to me that my witness looks right. I think about that. If my marriage isn't right and I need to go to counseling, I'm going to counseling. Whatever it takes. I recognize that I need to. So maybe those fears are that I keep my witness where it needs to be, that it's authentic, that it's real. But as far as they go, while I want them to have the best life they possibly can, it is their life, and they do get to choose. And sooner or later, we have to grow up and say, I'm not blaming mom and dad anymore. I'm responsible for the outcome of my life, and what am I going to do about it?
Yeah. I think that's you and I have talked before about, and this is kind of one of my questions, Joe. How do you not enable them? How do you can bring a kid in and provide some meals and some different things, and so where do you draw the line with these guys where you say, okay, it's time for you to own what you're doing and move to the next level versus them staying in your house for the next 20 years?
Yeah. Well, we've not had any issues with that, and that's a good thing. I don't have a desire to have a lot of adults live in our house. So, what does that look like? If someone's in school and college and really growing, and they needed a place to stay and it made sense. I mean, we're certainly going to look at that. These are folks we have relationship with. So it typically we get to know them, get to know a situation. However, I'm not going to do things that are unhealthy. I look for giving people a hand up, not a handout. And it happens. I know the difference. Most of us know the difference when someone is using you or using a situation versus needing authentic help. And I ask God to give me that discernment. And so I'm comfortable in those situations. I might err on the side of generosity. My wife might think I do. And she's a very generous person also. But sooner or later, I get it. There's a point at where it's unhealthy for that person.
Yeah. Yeah. They're not quite ready.
Yes.
Yeah. So how does this work with the rest of the family, and especially your wife, Kelly? Because I know part of our work here is always working for unity within the marriage on decisions, big decisions that we make, right? Like are we unified? And I can't imagine this going over well if you and Kelly weren't on the same page. How does that work?
Well, it's just worked. I'm not going to say there's not times that maybe we're not exactly on the same page, but Kelly sees the peace and comfort that gets brought by people being in our home. She sees it, and that warms her heart also. She has a similar heart, and I think that's important. So, if I may do things a little bit differently if it wasn't for Kelly's opinions. I'm not saying better, but differently. However, I have a responsibility to pay attention to my family, who we bring in the house, who we don't, how they disrupt the house.
You can think of safety risk and stuff like that.
Safety risk. And, when my family was younger, when I had younger girls in the house, I paid more attention to those types of things as we were working to we were foster parents and things like that. But I think, at the end of the day, it's something I'm always taking into account. The wonderful thing is, my children have the same kind of heart, and I'm really proud of that. Most of these people are their friends. That's how they got to our house in the first place.
Yeah,
we invite kids over, and so I'm proud to leave a legacy, to have a legacy of kids who think the same way.
Yeah, that's really neat because again, that's not impacting just that kid. That is impacting the next generation.
Yeah.
So that's really, really good stuff. So I know that you've had some involvement in Big Brothers, Big Sisters. Okay. So is any of what you're doing now related to that, or is it just of the same heart?
Well, I'll tell you how I got started. I've always wanted to accomplish great things my entire life. And, accomplishing great things is really a matter of opinion. But I say this, when I wanted to start helping people in a bigger way, I wanted to do something grandiose. And I realized that there's a flaw in how I thought. It was probably more about me. And I decided I'm going to help one person. I'd be true to myself. Let's start helping one person. And so I looked into Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and which, by the way, I think is an unbelievable organization. There's a huge need for adults to get involved. There's more than enough children that need to be helped. And it's as simple as you can have lunch with a child once a week at school, and it makes a difference. So I've been doing this 6-7 years, 2 different children involved. But it was me saying, hey, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and I'm going to impact one kid's life for the better. But what's happened is, I don't know, the Bible says, God says, if you trust it with a little, you can be trusted with a much. I feel blessed that more young people have come my way, that have entered my life. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So I just walk through that.
I think that's a really interesting point. I feel like sometimes we want to plan out our direction in life. Like, well, this is what I want to do. And then we start to find that God brings other things in, and we really don't even seek it out. True. One of the things that I've shared many times before, even though I talk a lot about strong dads and I talk about our own boys and we've adopted kids and all of that, I've shared my story many times with anxiety disorder, struggling with anxiety, early on in our marriage. And men are of the slowest of the group to get help for anxiety. I don't have any sign out in front of our office that says men with anxiety welcome. But I get an incredible amount of men that walk through my door, and within 15 minutes we're talking about an anxiety problem that they have. Yeah. And I just don't I go, wow, okay, so this is where we're going today. So to your point, it's not really in my plan, but it's something now that I see is valuable. Yes. So really neat stuff there. All right. So the bottom line here is we are talking about pouring into young men. And I think part of our mission here is this conversation. All right. Our mission of, there's so many things we could talk about. We could talk about politics and religion, and we could talk about sports, all kinds of different things. But my fear is that this conversation is not taking place enough. That us, and it's not taking place enough because us men don't want to talk about it because it's too close to home. All right. And so part of my challenge through this is not just having you on to tell a little bit of your story, but that we would start making this more of our conversation among men. In other words, challenging other men. Well, what are you doing? First and foremost, with your own kids, right?
Yes,
First
exactly.
and foremost, your own, right? And then after that, what are you doing to just making sure that fathers are being good fathers and boys are having a father? How do you feel about calling fathers out, young fathers or whatever, middle-aged fathers that are absent? Do you ever go, like the boys that you're working with, do you ever go to their father and say, hey, this guy actually needs you?
Not tremendously. And maybe I should. More often, I have those fathers thank me for what I'm doing for their children. And I try to encourage them the best I can about that. But I think it's a real struggle. And unfortunately, those fathers just don't have a solid foundation. And this anxiety you talk about is such a humongous issue. I have a favorite Bible verse, Psalm 127. If the Lord doesn't build the house, the builder builds in vain. If the Lord doesn't watch over the city, the watchman stays awake in vain. It is in vain that we go late to rest, early to rise, eating the bread of anxious toil. How many times in our lives are we we're called to be men, something tough, and we don't know how to do that.
No.
We don't have a foundation to be that individual, that leader in our home, that person that's willing to give up their life for their wife, and that attitude. So we don't have that foundation. And so there's so many. I'm thankful for this resource of Strong Dads and Rock Solid Families. And there's other organizations that are starting up. People in the community are recognizing that you have the foundation of God and then the foundation of the family, which is led by the man. And it's just the way it is. That's not a man that says, you will fall under my leadership. That's a man that says, I love you, honey, and she wants to be led in the home because of the way that you treat the family and that she knows that you have her best interest in mind. And I think that this is an epidemic issue, but I'm excited because it's becoming more obvious to people that men need to be taught, and there's resources starting to pop up in the community like your organization.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate the words to that, because that's exactly the narrative that I would like to see more of, and that I believe is essential. And I think, speaking to what you just mentioned there, our culture has, the pendulum always seems to be in motion. It doesn't just get stuck somewhere. The pendulum is swinging back and forth. And, as men, I think we lost our right in a lot of ways because we deserve to lose our right, because we lost our way of being the men that God desired us to be. Right. And so, now we're paying for that.
Right.
We're paying for that. We're saying, the ladies are saying, you can't treat us like that anymore. But I've also yet to deal with a lady that comes in for couples work and they don't want a strong husband. They all want a strong husband. They're like, no, I want him to be able to care for us.
Right.
I want him present. I want him in my kid's life. Right. And they don't ever talk about, I want him to have money. I want him to drive fancy cars. They don't do those things. Right. And so, just to your point, like, it just is that way. We also know that from the statistics, and this is not a point to argue. This is a fact. The idea that so the dad goes the family. Mm-hmm. If a dad brings his kids to church, I believe it's like 80% chance that the kids will continue. If mom brings the kids to church, it's like below 20% that they'll stay. Mm-hmm. And it's why? There is a sense of strength within a man that is attractive to the kids. Mm-hmm. But mom is that nurturer, and by default, you are the hero. Mm-hmm. You are the hero, right? Like, my dad can beat up your dad, right? Yeah. That's the little boy talk. And so I don't think we should discredit that, but we have to use it well.
Right.
Right. So, well, Tony, I want to thank you for just the work that you're doing, the heart that you have. I oftentimes wish my heart would be, there's times where my heart gets hardened in these situations where I'm like, but I love the word you convicted me with, we still have to be available. Mm-hmm. We have to be available, and people will come when they're ready to come. Mm-hmm. So I want to thank you for the work you're doing and the words that you put out there. Is there anything that you would like to say or challenge just our strong dads out there? Anything that you would like to add as we close up?
I think I would just leave you with this thought, and you reminded me of it yesterday in another discussion, and that is, in some ways, as men, I think that we're kind of like the dream makers. For the young boys, that we all have dreams, we want to accomplish dreams, and I think if we can think of ourselves as someone who's trying to protect and encourage dreams, that that's a love language that most boys can pick up on. And I'm always reminded of how most young men want to do good things. They want to please their fathers. It's inside of them, and it's really for us to be the type of men that we would be excited about our boys being. And if we've messed up in our own family, it's never too late to start.
That's right.
I've been married 22 years. I bombed twice before I was 30. God's used the last 25 years to dramatically change my life. It's never too late. Mm-hmm. And I've used all my brokenness to help people. So just encourage you. You're the keeper of dreams. You can either help these young men dream more, or you can crush them. And I just encourage you in that area.
Man, love those words. I think that's a huge part of all of us. When you stop dreaming, you often stop living, because dreams are based off of hope, right? They're kind of an energy source that comes out of hope. So that is just really a good point to end on. All right. So, Tony, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your work. Again, we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank Quality Auto Mart and Casey's Outdoor Solutions for the work that they do in our community, as well as just supporting our programming. I also I want to thank all of our Strong Dad listeners out there, and also our moms. We often have more moms that say they listen to a show and they go, honey, you should listen to this. And so we want to thank all of our listeners. Do us a favor, give us 5-star ratings so that we can be elevated and up on the search engines, so that people can find these kinds of shows and these kinds of conversations. All right. We also, we often feel like shows or topics maybe don't hit us personally, but I bet we know somebody it would benefit. And so share the show to people that you might think would benefit from it. So again, we want to thank all of you guys. So do me a favor and go out there and be a strong dad.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.